Lil Brunson back at you with the back at you. And I am the best reporting on the Eagles. I'm running into a situation, man. Let's beyond define injury prone. Let's really dig into it. Who's really an injury prone quarterback? Because there's a lot of disrespect and a lot of just craziness floating around my QB name right now, and I don't like it. The media is pushing this narrative that my boy is just not ready, that my boy is injury prone, that everything is always about his health. And it's scaring some of the fan base, quite frankly. So, I did some research, I don't like to come to you guys with just nonsense when I talk, because that's not me. I did some research on a few guys who I think, now mind you, Wentz has only missed 8 games out of 48. Mind you. Let's talk about Peyton Manning for a second. Peyton Manning played 240 games out of a possible 256 games. That is excellent. That is actually 93.8. He played in 93.8% of his games as a pro. That's what you call excellent. He is one of the epitomes of not being injury prone. Now let's talk about some guys who are a little shakier, who nobody really that I can remember really threw injury prone at a lot of these guys. Elway tore his ACL, similar to Carson Wentz. Elway played in 229 out of 256 games. That's a lot of games that he missed, if you ask me. Not really a lot, but he played a lot of games too. He played in 89% of his games. Does he qualify as injury prone? I mean, he missed more than 8 games. Similar situation to Carson Wentz. Who's to say Carson Wentz won't play in that many games? And Elway played in a more violent time for quarterbacks, in my opinion. Dan Marino played in 240 out of 270 games. Dan Marino missed 30 games. He missed 30 games. 88% of his games he played in, though. But he missed 30 games. That's the equivalent. That's the equivalent of around 2 football seasons. He missed the equivalent of 2 football seasons. Do people, when people think of Dan Marino, do they call him injury prone, though? No, they don't. They don't. It just don't happen. It's ultimate respect put on Dan Marino's name. Now, out of these 3 quarterbacks, Peyton Manning, Elway, and Dan Marino, was any of them an all-pro by the second year? I don't know about Peyton Manning. He was kind of trash in his first years. Dan Marino was most likely an all-pro. Dan Marino had one of the best second years out of a quarterback ever. Guess who else had one of the best second years of a quarterback ever? Carson Wentz. The best 3 second years of any quarterback in the National Football League, in my opinion, are Patrick Mahomes at number 1, Carson Wentz at number 2, Dan Marino at number 3. Anyway, moving on. Warren Moon. Warren Moon played in 192 games out of 240. 80%. Now you see how this is starting to get worse now. I don't hear of Warren Moon being labeled as injury prone, though. I don't hear of it. I don't hear it. I mean, Warren Moon played before I was really so coherent with what I know about sports, but 80%? Do you want your franchise quarterback playing in 80% of the games? Or do you want to see more out of your franchise quarterback? I think 80% is a little low for a franchise quarterback. But hey, who knows? Now let's get to Joe Montana. Joe Montana only played 164 games out of 217. 74%. Joe Montana, for his career, played in less than 75% of the games. Joe Montana, Hall of Famer. That's not the first thing that come to mind when you think of Joe Montana, though, being injury prone. Steve Smith. Now, Steve Young, I'm sorry. Now, Steve Young, a lot of people know about Steve Young injury woes, but Steve Young is a Hall of Famer. Steve Young only played in 104 games. 104 games got Steve Young into the Hall of Fame. Wentz damn near already there with 40 games. You know what I'm saying? Wentz already there with 40 games. That got that man into the Hall of Fame. That's crazy, man. 104 games out of how many? 104 games out of 128. 81.3%. That man in the Hall of Fame. Off 104 games. Now let's talk about a guy who is the epitome of injury prone. The epitome of injury prone. No other way to go around it. The epitome of injury prone. Troy Aikman. Troy Aikman, ladies and gentlemen, played in 165 games out of 191 games. He did that by the age of 34, but he was getting so tore up out there, he actually got retired on the field. He was retired. He was retired. Do you understand that? 34 years old. 34 years old. But he played in 86.6% of his games, which isn't a bad percentage. But he is the epitome of injury prone. Now Matthew Stafford, if I'm correct about Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford was drafted #1 in 2009. In 2009, Matthew Stafford was on the injured reserve list. He started 10 games and went right on the injured reserve list. If I'm correct, any Lions fans, feel free to correct me. Then in 2010, he ended up on the injured reserve list again. But he's one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the game. He's one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the game. You got to be kidding me, man. Sam Bradford is injury prone. That's an injury prone quarterback, Sam Bradford. I think injury prone, the misconception of injury prone gets thrown around way too much. It gets thrown around way too much. Aaron Rodgers has been beat up the last couple years. They're not calling Aaron Rodgers injury prone. The misconception of it all just gets thrown around too much, man. And granted, one thing that a lot of these guys who get these injuries have in common is they try to extend the play and they leave themselves they leave themselves out there for big hits. But the injury prone thing is getting thrown around way too much for Carson Wentz. Way too much. And I don't appreciate it, man. Out of 48 games, he played 40. He played 40 and he had season-ending injury. Season-ending injury and didn't even miss a whole season. Andrew Luck missed like 2 years. He missed like 2 years. But they're projecting the Colts to have one of the best offenses in the game. Andrew Luck not injury prone? Andrew Luck not injury prone? I don't understand. I just don't understand these dudes, bruh. I don't get it. I don't get it. Steve Young played 104 games, man. How's that not injury prone? Dudes are retiring at 34. How's that not injury prone? And how many of these dudes on the list was an all-pro by the second year? Carson Wentz is an all-pro. He was an all-pro by his second year. Who else in the division did that? Who else did? I don't think Eli Manning did that. What was the last quarterback in the NFC East that was all-pro within his first 2 years? Who was the last quarterback in the NFC East besides Carson Wentz that was all-pro within the last 2 years? Carson Wentz is special, man. And granted, a lot of these people that I named, this was a different era of football. It was more violent. They definitely wasn't protecting the quarterback like they are. But Elway played in 89.5% of the games. We had ACL injury. I mean, Aikman and these guys was just getting whacked. You know what I'm saying? These guys are literally injury prone, man. Literally getting knocked out of games and stuff like that, man. Listen, man, this is the moral of the story. You can't run around here calling people injury prone for having stuff like ACL injuries and stuff like that. This is stuff that happens to running athletes all the time. This is the stuff that happens to these players who are just trying to get out of the pocket. Steve Young ran around a lot. Joe Montana, not really sure if he ran around a lot. Peyton Manning, 93% of his games didn't move around a lot. It's a trend with these guys that move around. Aikman kind of moved around a lot. He was kind of shifty, holding on to the ball. Ben Roethlisberger, they got Ben Roethlisberger as being injury prone. Like not Matthew Stafford. Sam Bradford, in my opinion, Sam Bradford just had bad luck. If we want to call a spade, I got to call that more bad luck than being injury prone. I mean, the dude tore his ACL. What more do you want from him? He tore his ACL twice, man. It's just bad luck. It's just unfortunate. He's not even a running quarterback. He just tore his ACL. That stuff happens, man. That stuff happens. Roethlisberger only missed 16 games in his career. And I think like 4 to a suspension. And they call Roethlisberger injury prone. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, man? Listen, man, we got to change the narrative for injury prone, man. I don't like it, man. Tell me what y'all think in the comments.